Katie's there. Is that Stella? I see Stella, I think.
Stella!
It is Stella.
Oh, you gotta mute everyone.
Oh, hold on, you guys. I gotta mute. I gotta click the mute button real quick. Otherwise, it's gonna get really loud, okay? Look at all you guys. Stella, happy belated birthday. I hope you had a fun day. There's Katie. Hi, Katie. Are you doing it on your end? Okay. Well, you guys can probably hear me. Can everyone hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me okay. Yeah? Look at all you guys. This is so exciting. What a great group. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my wife, Lily, who's working on this right now. She's going to click the mute button. So I can't hear you guys, but you can hear me, okay? And if you have any questions, you can type in your questions, and Lily will tell me what your questions are, okay? So let's get started. For those of you who are just joining us and never been here before, welcome to Fossil Posse, Fossil Posse Adventures. For those of you who've been here lots of times, welcome back. And it's great to see you. I see so many familiar faces. It's really great to see everyone. My name is Mr. Billy, or Billy the Paleontologist, and I run Fossil Posse Adventures. And what we do is we celebrate everything dinosaurs and prehistoric world. And what we do at Fossil Posse is teach you guys all about what these crazy animals were like when they were alive millions of years ago. The earth has changed so much since they were alive. It's hard to understand what they were really like, what they looked like, how they lived. But through fossils, we learn all about what these animals are like, even though they were millions of years old. Now, for those of you who've been with us the last few sessions, we talked about these guys, the meat eaters, right? Allosaurus right here, Tyrannosaurus Rex here. Yeah, that's a little baby one. Otherwise, it'd be gigantic. We wouldn't be able to fit it in the room. So we're going to talk more about these guys in other sessions coming up. But today, you guys are in for something really cool, which we're going to get to in just a second. I just want to remind everyone, especially the parents, if you don't know about Fossil Posse, check out our website at fossilposse.com. We do summertime camps with kids, and we dig up fossils. We learn all about stuff. We get the kids outside and in the dirt digging for fossils, and it's so much fun, located here in Walcott, Colorado. Also, we were open a little museum. The museum at Dinosaur Junction, which is started up last summer, and we're continuing to grow. It's a little baby museum now, but it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. For those of you who care to donate to our cause, we are going to be a full-on nonprofit here shortly. There is a link on fossilposse.com to help our museum grow, because it's not just about dinosaurs here in the United States. It's about dinosaurs that live right here in Colorado, dinosaurs that we found fossils from right down the street, right? And also, this spring, I'm going to be doing a little TV show that I think you guys are really going to like. It's called Fossil Quest. And you guys come along with me through the TV, and we go out into the mountains, and we look for real fossils from dinosaurs and sharks and crocodiles and turtles and all kinds of amazing things that lived right here in Colorado millions of years ago. And I'm talking about when this used to be an ocean, when it used to be a jungle, when it used to be a gigantic desert, and now it's the Rocky Mountains. But this place has a long history of life, long before the Rocky Mountains were ever here. So that's what Fossil Quest is all about. All right, if you guys are ready, I'm ready, because I know you got some questions coming in. Here's also what we're gonna do. Let me let you a little laydown of what we're gonna do. I'm gonna talk for about 15 minutes, and I'm gonna show you some really cool stuff, and you're gonna learn some really cool stuff, whether you like it or not, because it's so neat, you're just gonna remember it. And then the last 15 minutes, we're going to do questions and answers of things that you guys want to know. So let's jump right in. As I mentioned, we talked about the big meat eaters. We've even talked about some of the gigantic long necks, which we'll talk more about in future shows. But today, it's about these guys, the horned dinosaurs, the really strange dinosaurs that we look at and we wonder, how the heck did that thing live and move around? Now, the one you guys know most likely, everyone knows, Triceratops. There's Triceratops, very familiar. He's got 3 horns, 1, two, and third one on his nose. He's got this big frill over his head, and he's one of the most recognizable horned dinosaurs there is. But nowadays, if you pick up dinosaur books, you see all kinds of weird dinosaurs, not just Triceratops, but dinosaurs that were kind of like Triceratops' cousins. And just to give you an idea, if I hold this picture up, look at all of those weird types of dinosaurs, all cousins, all with weird stuff on their heads. These dinosaurs had some of the biggest heads of any animals that ever lived. In fact, if you go back and look at the name Ceratops, right? Triceratops, Pentaceratops, Cosmoceratops, those are all names of horned dinosaurs. And the part of that name called Ceratops actually stands for horned face. So that's why so many of them have Ceratops at the end. Triceratops, because what does it have? 3 horns. 1, 2, 3. And the word tri means 3, right? A triangle has 3 corners. A tricycle has 3 wheels. Triceratops has 3 horns. Pentaceratops had 5 horns. The word penta means 5. Or we can look at this guy. He's kind of a new discovery since probably you guys have been alive. He's called Diabloceratops. And if you look at him, you see those horns sticking out the top of his head? His means devil-faced horned animal because he had these weird spikes coming out the top of his head. Styracosaurus. That's one of the only ones that ends in saurus and not ceratops. This guy means spiked lizard. Styracosaurus, spiked lizard. But these guys, there's probably dozens and dozens and dozens, maybe as many as 50 different kinds of horned dinosaurs. And they come in all shapes and sizes, all kinds of different decorations on their heads. Some of these guys were probably only as big as maybe your family dog, or maybe as big as a sheep or a goat. But some of them got over 30 feet long, weighed many, many tons, were bigger than elephants. To give you an idea about Triceratops right here, we'll probably stick mainly to this one because this is the one you guys recognize the most. Imagine Triceratops, he would have been a lot like an elephant's body, right? Because that looks, minus the tail, an elephant's body with this really super long tail, and then this enormous head. These horned dinosaurs had gigantic heads with these giant frills. And probably the most noticeable thing on the horned dinosaurs is just like the name says, the horns, right? They had all different horns. Some of them had little ones on their nose. Some of them had giant ones on their eyes and nose. Some of them had a single huge one, like almost like a unicorn sticking out. Some of them just had a big bump that should have been a horn, but for some reason, Mother Nature just made it a big bump. Actually, where's this guy right here? This guy's called Ceratopsian, and his name translates into big nose because he had this giant bump where normally there'd be a horn. He's got a giant bump on his nose, but he does have horns right there. So they're kind of weird, all kinds of strange. So let's look at the horns. I happen to have, here's a Triceratops horn right here, right? You look at that and you're like, wow, look how thick this is. This is from his skull, so this is all solid bone. These animals had to have really strong horns because when they're fighting animals like T-Rex, those animals are super strong, right? So this thing is solid bone. It's a giant piece of bone, but it gets better than that. I know you guys know what animals use horns for, right? To fight and defend themselves. But if I show you this picture of a Triceratops skull, you totally recognize that this is a pretty normal Triceratops skull. The giant horns sticking out, the little horn over the nose, the big frill right here. But what if I told you whenever you're in a museum and you see a Triceratops skeleton like this, that those horns were way bigger in real life than what you see in the fossilized skull? And I'll show you how that is. If I show you this horn that I had, right? This is a Triceratops horn. In real life, this would have been covered with the same stuff your fingernails are made from. Do some of you guys remember what that is? I know, keratin. Some of you guys got that. Keratin. Keratin is what your fingernails are made from. It's also what your hair is made from. It's also what the horn on a rhinoceros is made from. It's like a giant, thick fingernail on a rhinoceros's nose, which makes that big horn. So in real life, this piece of bone, because I just showed you that skull and it's connected to his skull, that big piece of bone would have had a giant piece of keratin on it. And if I use this is kind of an example of keratin. It's a giant cone, right? Now, if this was keratin, it'd be hollow, and this big piece of bone would go right over that. And this bone would grow, oops, let me hold this better. This keratin would grow over top that bone. So if we put that in there, if that's the skull, look how much bigger a horn was when the animal was alive. So his horns weren't short like this to try and fight T-Rex. That was just the inside of the horn. The real horn was almost 3 feet long, or maybe even longer. It was like a giant spike, right? It was a huge thing to fight off T-Rex. So every time you see a skull of a horned dinosaur, remember that those horns would have been way bigger because they would have had this big sheath or cover of keratin, the stuff your fingernails are made out of. So their horns would have really been their defensive way to protect themselves. That in addition to a giant thing on the back of their heads, right? Actually, one of the things I want to show you about the horns, they did protect themselves, and the reason scientists know that is because they can read the fossils. I know that sounds kind of funny. How do you read a fossil? A fossil is like a rock, right? Here's how. Fossils, and this, I know a lot of you guys that have been to Fossil Posse camp know this, right? And this is one of the things I like to tell kids. Fossils never lie. That's pretty neat, right? In a world where sometimes we don't know what's real and what's not real, fossils never lie. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Here's that bone, that big horn I showed you before. So this is a replica, by the way. This is a copy molded from a real horn, because a real one would be in a museum. A whole one like this is very rare. So this one is made of plastic, and it's an exact copy of the real one. But I do have a real piece of a horn right here. So this would have been taken right out of a section, popped out, and you can see how it's round, just like the horn is round. So this would have been popped right out. So that's a section of horn right here. And if I put this down, I want to show you something really cool. So this fossil is probably 65 million years or older, right? It's from Triceratops. We know that because where it was found. But here's the really cool thing. It's 65 million years old. But if I turn it, you guys see those two lines right there? Any idea what those are? I'll show you. Check this out. That is a big dinosaur tooth. And watch this. If I show you those little lines, this teeth goes right down there, and another one would go right there. What these are teeth marks from a big meat-eating dinosaur that attacked this poor Triceratops millions of years ago. We don't know if it killed it. This Triceratops might have survived. It might have gotten away. It did die eventually because it was 65 million years ago. But by this horn, we know that this dinosaur got attacked by a big meat-eating dinosaur. And here's something else that's really neat about Ceratopsian dinosaurs, or the horn-faced dinosaurs, and other dinosaurs that have big spikes and claws and things like that. If I hold this up here again, do you see all those little lines right there? All those little lines, there's those bite marks right there. All these little lines going through like a spider web. Those were veins. So we all have veins going through our arms, and that's where our blood flows, right? With these little canals, we'll call them canals. Veins and stuff would have been right in there. And then you remember it had that big piece of keratin over top that made the horn super strong and really long. So in thinking about that, with that big piece of keratin, think about this. That dinosaur that bit this horn had to bite through a really thick, think of it as a super thick fingernail, right? That part of the horn that's keratin, that tooth went through that, and it was still biting it so hard that it went right into the bone, and bones are strong, right? So that would have been a super, super strong bite from a big meat-eating dinosaur. But that's an example of fossils never lie. This animal is teaching us about what happened to it at some point during its life, even though it lived 65 million years ago or longer. That's pretty cool. That gives me goosebumps because that's so exciting, I think. Another thing that we recognize with these giant horned dinosaurs is this huge frill. The giant frill on Triceratops's head makes it one of the most recognizable animals, and it also makes his head gigantic. And here is a piece of frill. This is a real piece from a Triceratops's frill. You can kind of see all kinds of little knobby things and little spikes sticking out of it, but it would have been in that big thing that went around his head. This also has those little canals for veins because that frill had to be healthy. And that big frill probably had skin over top of it. Kind of like probably skin like a crocodile or an alligator, pretty rough skin covering that bone all across it. And here's something else neat about these guys. Their heads were so big that they didn't have muscles like or bones like we did normally to connect their skull with their neck. We have a particular vertebra that end, and then our head sits on that last vertebra, right? These guys had what's called kind of like a ball and socket. And what that is, it's a totally round piece of bone, almost like a ball, that was connected to another bone in the neck. And that head had a receiving end like a socket, and it could just roll around. So these giant animals could turn their heads all different directions really easily because it rolled around on that ball and socket, which helped it protect itself from big animals like Tyrannosaurus rex, right? Now the spikes, Triceratops doesn't have spikes, he's got horns, right? Styracosaurus has some spikes. Look at the size of those huge spikes. Styracosaurus had one of the biggest heads of any animal in the history of the whole world. It was like 7 feet long from here to his nose. His head was enormous. And their heads were so big and heavy that they had to have really heavy neck muscles to hold that head as they walked around. And here's another really cool thing about these dinosaurs. Often we think of dinosaurs and we see them in pictures, you know, 1 or 2 of them, maybe 4 or 5 of them traveling in little groups. Can you think of animals today that have big horns on their head that we see in huge herds? We have them in North America, we have them in Africa, right? I can hear some of you guys shouting them out. Deer, right? Elk. How about in Africa, they have antelope, right? And they all have big horns. They travel in huge groups. Or maybe animals that don't have horns like zebra, right? There's always big herds of them. A lot of times in nature, when you have the plant eaters, there's big herds of them because there's so many of them, they're so abundant that you have the meat eaters on the side grabbing 1 or 2 to keep themselves alive, kind of like a lion or a cheetah or a leopard eating a zebra or a impala or something like that, or antelope. So think about this. When Triceratops roamed North America, when Triceratops used to walk around the United States, it probably was in big herds. There was probably a lot of them. Think about big herds of elk or buffalo, things that traveled in giant packs, which actually makes Triceratops one of the most common dinosaurs to find because there were so many of them, which is really exciting to think they traveled in big groups like that. Now, one of the other things that was really unique, and we wrap things up here because we're going to get some good questions, is their beaks. If I hold these 2 dinosaurs up, one of the things that's really familiar, which looks weird on these guys, look at their mouths. They got beaks like a parrot, right? They had beaks that would have been pretty large. They would have been just like a parrot's beak. And as they opened and closed, they would have been razor sharp. And that was for cutting off like branches and leaves. And then those branches and leaves would move to the back of their mouth where they were ground up. Here's some Triceratops teeth. We've looked at meat-eating teeth, but those are Triceratops teeth. They're weird and flat, and they're made for grinding up plants. And a lot of these guys, they didn't have a few teeth. They had hundreds and hundreds of teeth. And occasionally they would fall out, new ones would grow out, and those would fall out, new ones would grow in. So they had big giant teeth for ripping off plants or ripping off branches and then grinding them up in the back right here. So they were pretty incredible. They're amazing animals. They're in their whole own group. You're going to see probably more of those discovered in the future, but that's a little bit about horned dinosaurs. And I think you guys probably have some questions. So go ahead, Lily, what do we got?
Your friend Joe Christiana's here.
Hey, Joe, how's it going? Good to see you, buddy. Now I'm nervous. You're tagging in. My friend Joe's watching. He's a real paleontologist.
I wonder if Dino Billy has ever found a really cool horned dinosaur.
That's funny you should ask, Joe. My friend Joe, who I'm talking about, he and I have dug up dinosaurs together. And yes, I have found a giant horned dinosaur, and he's found a horned dinosaur. And it's the same day that we were working on his horned dinosaur, which was a little baby. I think it was a baby one of these. We're not sure yet, but it was a little baby Ceratopsian. Something's very similar, and it was little. It was probably about the size of maybe a sheep or a big goat or something like that. And we were working on his, and I decided to take a little bit of a break. So I went for a hike, and I was walking around, and we were in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing. It was like desert and hills, and there was no plants. It was hot. And I'm just walking around, and I look down on the ground, and what do I see? One of those giant beaks, just what I was talking about. And I picked it up, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a huge beak to a horned dinosaur, right? So I tried to figure out where it came from, and I saw these pieces of bone sliding down a steep hill. So it had to have come from up there. So I climbed up, and found where the bones were sticking out of the hillside. We dug in there, and there ended up being the whole skull to we think, a Pentaceratops. And he's one of the ones that had 5 horns, 1 over each eye, 1 on his nose, and then he had 1 on each cheek sticking out like that. He had a big frill, and that skull is now in the Denver Museum. Hopefully one day it'll be put out on display. And Joe, I think yours is in there too. Joe's little one, the little baby one, which was so cool. That's in the museum as well, and hopefully that'll be on display. And someday, we hope so, because that was a lot of work, I know, right, Joe? Yeah, a lot of work. Dinosaurs digging is a lot of work. But good to see you, pal. Thanks for joining us. Next question.
So
Oliver, hey, pal, good to see you.
He asked if they were in the Jurassic period.
Were Ceratopsian dinosaurs in the Jurassic period? That's a terrific question. And I never claim to know everything. There's always more to learn. But I think that they're distant cousins, because there was so many different kinds. Remember, Triceratops was just one of maybe as many as 50 different kinds of horned dinosaurs that lived over millions of years. Generally speaking, they're in the last part of the dinosaurs, the Cretaceous period. But I think that there was a little lineage, cousins, and really distant cousins that were in the middle or end of the Jurassic period that eventually evolved into the really big ones that came later on. Oliver always has a great question. Thanks for asking, pal. I appreciate that. But you know what? Also, real quick, if you're never not sure, read up on it. You can never read too many books. And like I said, I do not claim to know everything. I still read books all the time to learn more and more about these animals because they're so cool. Next question.
Stella wants to know how the horns form.
Stella had a birthday yesterday. Happy belated birthday again, Stella. Stella's in Los Angeles, California, and thanks for joining us again. I know you were here in the last show, so thanks for being here. How did their horns form? That's a great question. Remember how I showed you how this big sheath, this keratin, the horn would grow from that, right? It was in there. So when it was alive, this would be over it like this. When they were first born, baby horned dinosaurs or baby Triceratops probably didn't really have anything yet. But as they grew, kind of like a baby steer or a baby cow, when they're first born, their heads are pretty smooth. And pretty quickly, you start to see these little teeny nubs. Little teeny nubs start to grow on a baby calf or a baby steer or cow, and pretty soon those nubs get bigger. And as those nubs grow, that keratin, that fingernail, kind of just grows out of that. Kind of like your fingernails just kind of come out of your finger, right? There's a place in that skin section, there's a place in your finger where your fingernail starts. It doesn't start way up here, right? It starts way in here, and it slowly starts to grow out. So it just takes a lot of time. That's a terrific question, Stella. They just started as little teeny nubs. They call them buds. And as they got bigger, that keratin grew on there, and then the whole thing just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And when they died, just like when people die or any animal, anything that's keratin, your hair, your fingernails, eventually that turns to dust. But the bone doesn't. That's why we have those horns, the bone pieces, and we do know that keratin was on top of that. Great question, Stella. Thank you. All right, another one.
Colette in New York.
Hi, Colette, calling from New York.
Can you just, she wants to know what a frill is.
A frill. What is a frill? A frill, here, I'll hold these all up in the camera so you can see them all. These are all different horned dinosaurs, but you can see what they have in common. They all have horns, and they all have those big, weird things growing off the back of their head. These big, this right here is called a frill. Here's his frill. His frill is there, but he's got spikes growing out the top of it. This guy's big frill has all kinds of spikes. And there's little Nasuto. He's got a funny little frill. His frill wasn't real big, but he had big horns, kind of like a bull. So that's what the frill is, Colette. It's a giant, giant piece of bone that grew out the back of their heads and splayed out like that. And it would have had real heavy skin, like that big one right there. You can see there's his eyes right here. Here's his eye, here's his mouth right here. And then this is all frill, and then that frill has big spikes growing out of it. So they're very weird animals. I know you're probably trying to go, that's so strange to think of this huge thing behind their head. It is. They're weird animals. There's actually some modern lizards. There's some lizards that live today, chameleons particularly, that some of those have those weird things behind their head. They're little frills that stick out. Now, a lot of people think they're for showing off to see look how big they are, or to look bigger than they are to try and scare predators. But a lot of the big ones, especially the dinosaurs, were probably to protect their necks. Because if you notice, that big frill, you look way back here, there's his neck way back there. So all this guy had to do was lean back like this, and he could protect that neck from a big meat-eating dinosaur. Great question, Colette. All right, what do we got?
Kelly Lycan and family.
Hey, Kelly and family. Kelly Lycan and family.
Would like to know how many teeth Triceratops has.
Great question. So remember I showed you these teeth, Triceratops teeth. If we look at these, this is a big meaty. This is a tyrannosaur tooth. That is a tooth for biting a big chunk of meat. It's almost like a steak knife. But if we look at these again, these are Triceratops teeth. They're almost square and kind of funny looking, and they're a little bit chipped and broken, but remember, they're millions of years old. And these were used for grinding. So if you imagine taking two cheese graters, all right? Two cheese graters and putting them together and just going like this with them. They would just grind up whatever's in there. And that's what those teeth did. And they would have had hundreds and hundreds of those teeth. And they would have regularly fallen out, and new ones would grow back, and fallen out, and new ones grow back. When we're on trips with like the museums or something, we find teeth all the time. Because you remember one of the last presentations I did is dinosaurs, they're not like you and I. Our teeth don't grow in, our baby teeth, and then those fall out, and then the adult teeth grow in, and then that's it. Their teeth would grow and fall out, grow and fall out, grow and fall out their whole life. So they had to have a lot of them. And the meat or plant-eating dinosaurs, generally speaking, had hundreds of teeth, all packed together like grinding boards. Great question, Kelly Lycan and family. Next one.
Nika wants to know how many horns the Ceratopsian family has.
Nika, great question. How many horns can the Ceratopsian family have? You know what? I'm going to show you this one picture again because it'll really help explain it. Because here's just a small example. These are all different horned dinosaurs. Each one, they're different. And look at each one has a different array of horns. Some of them go straight up. Some of them point sideways. Some of them point down. Some of them have huge spikes all over their frills. Some of them don't have really much horns at all, like that one on the far side. He's got that giant weird bump. Or the guy at the very end, his horn grew up and then went straight out and went horizontally. There's no real design. There could be anything. Because that's one of the most amazing things about Mother Nature is she tries everything. And that's what's called natural selection when it comes to nature. Natural selection is when Mother Nature's trying all these different things and they find out what formulas or what recipes work perfect. And the ones that work perfect are the ones that live long lives and they go on to develop even more to cooler animals. And the ones that don't work so well, they usually go extinct because it just didn't work really well. So I hope that helps. They can have all kinds of different designs of horns and spikes. And to differentiate them too, by the way, you're probably going, well, what's the difference between a horn and a spike? Horns are usually on their face, over their eyes, on their nose, again, like a rhinoceros, right? Horns, or you can think of like a deer and elk. Spikes are usually shooting off their frill on the side. Looks like we've got about 10 minutes left, so let's take a few more questions.
Colette wants to know what dinosaurs' teeth are made out of.
Colette asked again, Colette from New York, another terrific question. What are dinosaurs' teeth made out of? They're made out of the same stuff that yours are, the same stuff that mine are. There's dentin, right? In the middle of that, there's enamel on the outside. The enamel, if we look at this one, remember this tooth is millions of years old, right? It's millions of years old, but you can still see how it's shiny, right? Just like your teeth. That white part is called enamel. It's kind of like a really thin glass covering over the inside, which is almost kind of like bone. Dentin's kind of like bone, but softer. And that's what teeth are made out of, the same as yours. It's just when these ones died, when these dinosaurs died, these teeth fossilized. They turned into rock, basically. But they kept all of the detail. That's why you see the shiny glass-like enamel. And then if I was to break it open, which I don't want to do because this is really old, you'd see the fossilized dentin on the inside. Great question. That's what they're made out of. Same as you.
Chloe would like to know, did any dinosaurs go underwater and on land?
Chloe asked, did any dinosaurs go underwater and on land? Absolutely yes. Just like a lot of animals today that live on land, look at an elephant, the biggest land animal ever, or not ever, but nowadays, right? They can swim. You see elephants playing in water all the time. I'm sure dinosaurs could hold their breath and go underwater. And there was lots of dinosaurs like Spinosaurus. Spinosaurus is a famous big meat-eating dinosaur with a big fin on his back. And he spent probably most of his life walking along the edges of the ocean or swamps and swimming in the oceans and swamps to catch fish and turtles and little crocodiles and eat that kind of stuff. So there was lots of them that went back and forth. But if you remember the show we did on marine reptiles, so far we haven't discovered any dinosaurs that lived their whole life in the ocean to the point where they had flippers. Those are all marine reptiles. So far, and that's what's exciting about science, is you don't know what someone's going to discover tomorrow. It could be something brand new. But so far, there's been no dinosaurs discovered that lived their whole life in the ocean. But yes, there's probably lots of them that went back and forth. Great question. Man, we're getting some good questions today. Next one.
I think that might be it.
Yeah? You guys, I can't thank you enough for we got one more.
Have there been any horned dinosaurs found in Texas?
Have there been any horned dinosaurs found in Texas?
That's from Cooper, Cash, and Carson.
Cooper, Cash, and Carson, and my nephew's in Texas. Good to see you guys. Hopefully your sister Caroline's there somewhere too. I see you smile. I'm giving you a shout out. I think absolutely. There's been horned dinosaurs pretty much found all over in different places. They're pretty common. As I mentioned, I don't know everything. I never pretend to know everything because you're silly if you say I know everything. No one knows everything. I'm always having to learn more stuff all the time. And in fact, when I'm done, I'm going to look up which horned dinosaurs were found in Texas because I think there's some, probably Triceratops for sure, because he was all over the place. But there was ones even further back. So I'm going to check that one and see what's been found there. Is that it? Is that all we got?
Joe wants to know what your time was like working in the field.
My friend Joe Christensen in Denver, he's a real paleontologist, as I said before. And he and I have dug up lots of dinosaurs together in Utah and all kinds of other places. And he asked, what was my time like in the field with him, digging up dinosaurs? Absolutely wonderful. The most fun I could ever have, but the hardest job I've ever had. So sometimes if you have something you have to do, like a job, and it really stinks, and it's really hard, you got to just do it because sometimes it's going to be an awful lot of fun. So hunting dinosaurs and digging up dinosaurs is the most difficult job I've ever had. And I mean, my hands were cut up. I had bandages all over my hands. I had blisters on my feet. I was in so much pain every day from digging it, but it was so exciting and so much fun. It was the most rewarding job I've ever had. So Joe, it was an absolute joy, and hopefully you and I can do it again soon because it was nothing but great. That's a good question. I like that. All right, you guys. We're going to wrap it up. I think that's about it. Feel free to email me on fossilposse.com. Fossilposse.com. If you're coming out to Colorado this summer, plan on a trip, stop by either see the museum or come to camp. But fossilposse.com, look for Fossil Quest. There's actually also a link on fossilposse.com to donate to the museum at Dinosaur Junction, which is going to be a great thing. So you guys, thank you so much. We'll see you on next Wednesday. Remember, Wednesdays and Fridays. Oh, sorry, this Friday. Wednesdays and Fridays, 10 a.m. And we're going to pick a different topic and do exactly like we just did. And feel free to email me if you want to know about a particular thing. So thanks again. Everyone have a great day. Be patient with your parents. We live in weird times right now, but all this stuff will pass. So be good to your parents. Be good to each other. Take care. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.